Go live here. All right, I think we're live, dog. Siegfried, what's
Hey,
up? What's going on, Joey? You're back. Are you back from? I'm assuming Japan.
I'm back. Yes,
Okay,
and it's been a boy. You take off for a week and stuff piles up, so it's
these
been a
things
busy
happen.
week. But
Yeah.
yeah,
What happened in Japan? What's going on over there?
yeah. Um, boy, I mean, the most important thing is I ate a lot of amazing food, so let's just get that out of the way.
That's
But
always my
boy,
favorite part of traveling. Yeah.
the exchange rate can't beat it. You have like this bowl of amazing ramen, and you do the math. It's like, oh, this was like 650. So it's yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. But no, lots of Lorwyn stuff, obviously. So I went over there with the foundation's BD person, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone's ever sort of reached out to Foundation for, well, you'll probably end up talking to Amy at some point. She's a
Mm-hmm.
total boss and gets stuff done. Um, so it was good to be over there with her, and she had lined up a bunch of meetings with all these companies that were Japan based or sort of like other APAC region stuff. So it was just like total back to back. A lot of good conversations. Like for Helium, the big interest is like roaming.
Okay.
At this sort of level,
Yep.
uh, we weren't looking at like the standard Helium audience in Japan, largely because the Japanese government requires licenses if somebody's going to set up a hotspot. You need to be a licensed operator of a radio.
Really? Okay.
And so that's it. And that's why, yeah, we don't see a ton of gateways in Japan because, there's rules against that sort of thing, and they take those things very seriously. So some of the rules are very similar to the United States and other regions where they, want to make sure you're not swapping antennas after you buy the thing and stuff like that. But
What
others
kind
are,
of scum
yeah.
sucker would do that?
I know, yeah. Like, did you even know that that's one of the rules? So,
Hmm.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so it was really cool to talk to some of these folks that were doing sort of big deployments, and then trying to figure out like, hey, like where does helium fit into this for me? And oftentimes that story is like, we're going to expand outside of Japan, or we need to be able to share access, or things like that. Um, so so some really cool stuff, and
Had a lot
yeah,
of people heard about it when you said on with helium? Was there a lot of like, well, what's that? Or was there like, oh, cool, that's whatever, XYZ?
it was actually more people had heard about it than previously, for events like this that I've
Yep.
done.
Yep.
So we actually had a couple of people like pull up their wallet app and be like, "Yeah, it's my hotspot."
What's up,
Um,
yo?
and-
Yeah.
yeah, so it was, and then like help answer a couple of questions around like Solana migration and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was good to be there and sort of meet these builders face to face and make sure that the message was coming across clear. So um, yeah, a couple of good opportunities that we'll continue to follow up on. But all in all, yeah, I,
Okay.
I think that the high level thing for me is this was my first event in this sort of new strategy that I think we rolled out some comms on this a while ago, but like not doing big bang helium house events and
Mm-hmm.
instead just like try to make a presence everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And this really felt like um, it felt like the right move going to this event.
Okay.
Being there, being with these people in person, being the presence. I did those videos to sort of like show the community what's going on in these events, and I think that was well received. I'm still looking for feedback on those, but
Yeah, those are super cool to
yeah.
see what's going on. I mean, it's always like I go to those, not like I go to a bunch of those things, but when I went to the one in Barcelona, it's like, oh, dude, there's like a million devices out here. And most of like the dopamine hits I got was like, ooh, what's that device? What does that thing do?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's real easy to fall into that trap. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my dog, make sure she's not doing anything crazy.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, like we had Broen, Netbox, Tectelic, of course, Rack was out there, like all your standard players in the LoRaWAN space. So it was cool to be there, sort of see some new products from some of those folks,
Yep.
um, and you can't help but let the gears turn on like, oh, where would I plug that in?
Did
So,
you get on the did you get on the bullet train and fire up your mapper?
no, well, so yeah, the network coverage in Tokyo is a little thin, but around the conference center, I was walking around with my mapper, and here it is, with my little demo sticker on there for
Nice.
keep people confused. Um, but yeah, there was actually pretty good coverage. Like the whole conference center had helium coverage. I think there were like two gateways sort of covering that whole area, and that was like before anyone showed up. So I knew those were
And
old.
to use those gateways, I think Siegfried had asked it, like, is it a pretty hard test, or like to, I guess, to get the ability to deploy those things, or is it more like you fill out this form just so everybody knows what's going on, or do you know?
It's a little bit of fill out the form, but it's more so it's like pay some money.
Mm.
And so it's not something, and you actually need to show staff too. You can't just do it as a solo person. Someone was
Oh,
telling me you need like your technical lead or something to sign off on parts of this forms. So it's really structured as a thing that like a business would only be doing. It's not the individuals. Um,
huh.
and and there may be paths to making this a little bit more open in the region. We've been talking with Semtech around paths for trying to see that happen, but these are slow burn type things when you're
Yeah.
dealing with government at that level.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's. I guess I forget just I'll be a little pro-American here, like just how like free and easy it is here in the states to get to do things, right? Like we tend to be
You can be
pissed at
pro
the
European
DMV.
too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like it's just so easy. Even if you sit in line at the DMV for a while, there's still like no one stopping you from getting a license, or no one's like it's not that difficult to start a business, to run a business, to do like all of these different things. And in other
Totally.
parts of the world, sometimes it can be super restrictive, and we kind of tend to forget that as a fundamental advantage of having a little bit easier path to get shit done.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And this one, it kind of snuck under the radar a little bit for, at least for me for a while, because it was one of those things where it's like, well, yeah, there's some gateways there, and like there's LoRaWAN regions. Like people are doing LoRaWAN in Japan. Why wouldn't it work? And you go into those details. And
one thing leads to another. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Let's see. So always need to see kind of what's going on with these new things. Was there any like big picture takeaway that you walked away like, holy shit, we really need to do this. We need to attack this pretty hard, or this is an opportunity we didn't know about, or kind of what were some of the.
I mean, I was grinding on docs the entire time I was in my hotel room. It's just like every time we're talking to one of these guys about roaming, about setting up an operation, converting the gateway. So we've seen a ton of interest in data only hotspots, in setting up an LNS. Uh, it's it's actually frankly surprising the volume of folks that have come in. We're like, oh yeah, data only hotspots. Like we saw maybe one or two of those at a time, right?
Yep.
Um, but it tends to be a really clean path for existing operators to bring those gateways into Helium.
Yep.
And so got to get that stuff together. I actually shipped the Open LNS docs last night.
Oh,
So
nice, dude.
that stuff's live. There's a couple little touch up things that I want to dig in and keep cleaning up there, but that's it's got a ton of it's a complete rewrite, obviously, and then added a bunch of widgets to make some stuff sort of more straightforward, things like that.
Okay.
Um, but so yeah, takeaways like we got to make it clear, we got to make it easy, and then the really big piece of this, I think, is, eh, and we've seen this before, but like the the connectivity ecosystem is always going to be in a little bit of a like wait and see
Mm,
position. And like, oh yeah, well, you know, maybe if somebody like that I respect or trust in this space goes and uses Helium, then I'll use Helium.
right.
And so it always comes, and I've been saying this since the beginning of the year. It's like case studies. This is the year of the case study for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. You got to find who's using it, how are you using it, is it working, all that stuff.
yeah.
I think we're
And
past
so
the first point.
yeah, we're pushing on that stuff. Some yeah, some stuff hopefully soon on the studies front. Amy's been writing a ton of stuff that's like really exciting, and then yeah, we'll tell some really good stories around people using the heck out of the network.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. I know on the Medeo Scientific side, I'm seeing people asking a ton of questions that I don't always have the answers to. So that part is just like, oh, there's parts here, and that is right now specifically revolving around MQTT integration,
Hmm.
which right now, like, there's a way to do it on a MetSci using HTTP, but I haven't done it yet, so of course it's confusing to me. And I think there's like improvements to be made, but certainly there's a lot of interest in folks coming in and using it. So
Cool. I'll
yeah,
have to think about adding some little MQTT section to the OpenLNS docs,
it's a
or
pretty
you just
big deal. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. I
Um,
never use it. I just go like HTTP. I'm like push it to a server all the time, but I know MQTT is a huge deal. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. When I fiddled with it, when I set up my like garage light integration turn on or whatever it was like, oh, this is super cool. And then as I read more about MQTT, it's like, oh, well, clearly I need to know more about this and use it.
yeah.
So
Uh,
let's see. Were the Goodyear people there? I'm seeing that on the Goodyear Tire
no
Station
Goodyear
thing.
people in Tokyo.
Okay,
No. Um,
they do not exist.
uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Tokyo, there's so few cars. Frankly, it's
Really?
probably a terrible market for tires.
Huh.
There are bikes everywhere. The only cars you see on the road are either utility trucks moving stuff around because
Huh.
stuff needs to be moved around,
Yep.
or taxis. Almost no private cars. It's
Huh.
like it is the urban utopia that people always talk about in the States.
Huh. Okay. Cool. And I'm guessing the air was cleaner because of it.
Air was cleaner. Like, yeah, you could walk around, and the public transit is. I took a picture of the public transit map. It's like, frankly, a little terrifying. Um,
Huh.
but
Okay.
yeah,
But you got around. You didn't get lost, and you made it back. So that's always the
I got lost once. Yeah,
okay.
missed a stop, and then I had to figure out how to like turn around and go back. But yeah,
Not permanently lost. All right.
not permanently lost. Google
Cool.
Google Maps.
Yeah. The magic works all over the world. Thanks, Google.
Yeah, Nick, I think you've got an update. I'm gonna call you out.
Oh, what's my update?
Uh, device bridges. What's going on
Oh,
over there?
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Helium Bridge thing. I probably should have grabbed it out of the garage and brought it in here, but I think we did release that this week. So, and we fulfilled kind of the final pieces of the grant, which was super cool. That may be one of the last grants that gets kind of approved and finished off, which is super cool. But the idea is that you take any device in out there, and I've got, as usual, I've got them on my desk. So this thing is not a helium soil moisture sensor. It's God, I always get this wrong. It sends out over RTL 433, some radio protocol. It's not helium. So, and there's thousands of these things around there. These are pretty cheap, 20, $30. So the idea that Dirk and I had for the Helium Bridge was that you could take a device, have it listen for all of those different signals, and then rebroadcast that signal onto Helium. And so you take that thing, which has a range of whatever, maybe 100 meters max, right? Most of these things get sold with a little unit that has to get plugged into the wall and connected to your Wi-Fi. So for around the house, this is fine. But if you wanted to put a bunch of these out somewhere where there isn't Wi-Fi, there isn't power, for the kind of hub unit, you're screwed. And that's where the Alien Bridge comes in and says like, okay, this thing runs on solar. So you could put that soil moisture sensor out anywhere, agriculture, etc. Even like larger garden tracks for people or for community gardens. And as long as there's helium coverage there and you put a helium bridge in, the cool thing about the helium bridge is not only will it listen for that, but you can put multiple sensors on there. It will listen to and rebroadcast everything. So if you had a weather sensor as well as that soil moisture, or you had an air quality sensor, whatever, like as long as they don't collide, and we think there's probably like a reasonable limit of 10 sensors per helium bridge, but could be more. And
Mhm.
certainly there's more work that could be done there. You can get a bunch of different sensors all using the same bridge. So
And can you tell that if you had like 10 soil moisture sensors, can you tell them all apart?
I believe so. I'd have to check with Dirk, but I think there's something in there where it's like it broadcasts its own like ID. So you
Hmm.
would have to name it. You'd have probably have to name it in the decoder, but I'll have to double check on that.
I mean, that's super cool because like even if it is near home, you can skip the standard base station that they'd be coming with,
Yep,
and it would actually give you the ability to do all this stuff over the internet as opposed to whatever,
through their
you know,
system.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You
yeah.
get like full control of that data.
And then the other thing we did in that you can do in the bridge that we did for the weather station, which was how the whole thing started, is that there's these eco wet weather stations. They're back there behind me. That are super cool, and they're $109 plus shipping. So for a remote weather station, that's incredibly cheap. But
Yeah.
they do the FSK thing, so they're super short range. So that's why we built the Helium bridge for them, so I could put them out on a mountain. And the bridge can not only kind of repeat what it's hearing kind of immediately, but it can also aggregate and process some of that data. So the
Hmm.
EcoWit, the what is it, WS80, is a weather station, fires I think every 1.7 seconds. So if you're shooting things across helium every 1.7 seconds, it clutters things up, and it can be like even though data is fundamentally cheap, it can end up being pretty expensive because you're taking all these different parameters, 11 different parameters, and firing them off every 1.7 seconds. It's just like it's not a
Yeah.
great use of helium. But if
You've
you
got like
say,
a
hey,
2 or 3 data credit payload happening pretty frequently. Yeah.
mm-hmm, yeah. So what you can do is say, all right, well, what is the requirement for this use case? For paragliding, we might want to know every 30 seconds. We might want to know every 1 to 5 minutes, depending on kind of where the station is. For a farmer for ag, maybe they just want to know every hour. You can gather all that data that comes in every 1.7 seconds and either average it or whatever, give you a high or a low value for wind speed or direction or like whatever it is that you want, and then send that out as a much smaller payload, much less frequently. So kind of a cool thing that you can do on the bridge is process, and I think is that called processing data on the edge? I think that's what that is. So it's like a little bit like edge processing that happens on the bridge and then it goes back. And that is stuff that you have to custom write. So Dirk wrote that for the WS80. So it's kind of out there as you can use it right now and also as an example for someone else. And the
Hmm.
hope is that someone comes along and says, okay, what you guys did is pretty cool. Maybe you make it at home with your kid and that's kind of neat. But ideally, Rack or Seed or some other company comes along and says, we're actually going to take this thing because I think it's MIT open source license and they can make a bunch of them and make it kind of a really clean unit and super easy to deploy and maybe for a specific set of sensors. So it's like, hey, here's your garden array.
Hmm.
Or it could be, here's your whatever racing array if you want to put them on cars or bikes or motorcycles or fucking helicopters, drones, whatever.
That's cool.
So
It, yeah, I guess the other is there sort of like a pairing process for the devices, or do you just turn them on and it starts listening?
you just turn it on, it's listening because the sensors, at least the ones that we've used so far, so those are all off the RTL 433. Those are the ones that we got working. Those are just constantly sending it out. Basically, I think I'm using the term right, in the blind, where they're just like, yeah, here it is,
Mm.
here it is, here it is, here it is, and they don't give a
Hmm.
fuck if it gets listened to or not. And so as long as you turn the bridge on, the bridge is listening, and it's just like, all right, what's in the area? So it's conceivable and probably likely for most people in an urban environment that you turn your bridge on to get your whatever soil moisture data, and you also get your neighbors whatever data they're pushing out on whatever device they have through kind of no fault or intent of your own. It's like almost like accidental what's called war driving, where you're driving around and like listening for signals from all these devices. So kind of cool.
You can knock on their door and tell them to water their plants.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just come and knock on my door. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's these weather stations that use it. There's air quality monitors. There's all kinds of things that use these various protocols, and so it's like an interesting thing to think about. How do you? I think this is one of the next big kind of opportunities in the general probably IoT space and Helium specifically, as well as a couple other projects. Is how do you start to aggregate all of this data? How do you take your soil moisture sensor and your neighbor's weather station and your other neighbor's air quality monitor and all this stuff so that all of you guys don't have to buy the same thing and put it into some kind of useful dashboard or alert or notification or whatever system that
Hmm.
is usable, especially if you can gather all that on a much larger level. You know, cover my little neighborhood with 4 helium bridges or 8 helium bridges or whatever it is. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've got really detailed data for a ton of different kind of granular locations.
Right. And every neighbor can participate for $10 for whatever sensor or $100 for a weather station. Like, and it's one of those things that we've had that conversation for helium devices
Yep.
for ages, right? Of like,
Yep.
how do we bring the price down? How do we make this like more consumer facing?
Yep.
Um, so yeah,
And
I think that's an awesome step.
there's a question here. This was when we originally submitted the bridge grant, our idea was that we would do devices for the RTL 433 and Bluetooth and ANT plus and I think Wi-Fi. And as we got into it, we're like, oh, we actually way overstepped there. Like that was much harder to do in the time frame we had. So we dialed it back to just doing 4 devices on RTL 433. But the intent is it will and can act as whatever it is that you want. So it can pick up on Bluetooth, it can pick up Wi-Fi or whatever. And that's where we're hoping that manufacturers come in and say like, hey, that's a cool idea. We're going to use the work that you did to kind of skip ahead by 2 or 3 months and then jump in and yeah, like your Bluetooth stuff. I mean, some of the stuff for the VO2 Max mask I've been working on, the bridge would be super nice if it's Bluetooth only.
Totally. Oh, that's exciting. I'm gonna have to build one of those out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could totally imagine like TTGo or one of those companies that tends to grab those open source designs and um, or I guess they're more ones to like build custom hardware around open source projects, but like there are definitely folks out there that would grab something like that and
Yeah.
scale it up a little bit.
And we submitted what's called a SIBR, a special small business innovation research grant for it to the U.S. government. Said, hey, we got this thing. We think we can do a couple other things with it. Are you guys interested in it? So we'll see if that goes, we can then turn around and probably improve the design quite a bit and have something that's a little bit more, you could buy off the shelf. Like we could put a buy now link on this channel, and you could buy it and have it shipped to you rather than having to make it at home. So
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, Kindy, something like that. But
yeah,
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 there's all
yeah. And
sorts of
there's
ways to get those
actually
things out there.
one more market that I'll probably be announcing next. I'm not sure if it'll be as soon as next week. Might be a little bit later, but it's think of it as like an alpha version market. So on Tindy you buy it, and if you Jesus, I've got my desk covered with shit from various things. I think I've got one down here from Tindy. What is it? No, this whatever this is, like a Marauder Mini. So you can buy this thing. This thing works. You can listen to Wi-Fi. You can do all your Wi-Fi hacking crap on that thing. It basically shows up functional. Now it's a 3D print thing. Like it's not some mass manufactured piece, but it shows up and it works. And there's not that much that I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of Tindy appears to be to me. Is that like when you buy things, the thing works, right? Maybe it's not Apple, but it works. This marketplace that a friend of mine is working on is more of an alpha marketplace. So you buy it and it mostly works, or you buy it and it works enough, or you buy it and it's the hardware and you do a little bit of extra stuff to make it work. So the Helium Bridge would be a classic thing that we'd put on there where you buy it, but you would have to write your own decoder for your sensor, right? Or you'd have to do some small modification. So it's just kind of getting you a little bit further upstream on getting access to these devices and also making it so hardware really small experimenters like me. I'm not going to go to China and be like, hey, I want you guys to run off 10,000 of these bridges. But I could certainly make 20 of them in the garage and sell those things and kind of have enough to make another 20 or 30 or 50 or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah,
So,
I gotta put one together. It looked like a pretty straightforward design, if I remember correctly. You're using kind of an off-the-shelf LoRaWAN dev board,
yep.
and then there was the RTL 433 chip, and then
Yep.
you had some like battery management, like solar stuff in there.
Yeah.
Um, it I get it pretty clean.
And the solar stuff was all done on the LilyGo. So like the
Okay.
idea is that you buy something. Yeah. Bad Penny Rock. Yeah. That's the guy who's doing that. Yeah, is that everything is, we kind of wanted to make it so that it was almost as easy as possible. Now there is one caveat here, and it came about because Dirk and I would just wanted to have a ton of fun and fuck around with something new, and that is the board as designed and presented is you need some way to kind of, this is not the technical term, but to cook it in a reflow oven.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's setups for reflow oven, which, I mean, that thing, the kit was $315, and then the toaster oven I think was like $50 or something like that. And then you end up with, and really, I mean, this initial version was aimed at experimenters or people who might kind of know what that is and have access to it. But look, I made that fucking thing. I'm not a technical dude at all. if you can put together an IKEA cabinet, you can build a reflow oven. And I think it was like such a fun project because it took, 2.5 days, and there was some geekery involved and some cutting of wires, and I don't even know what the fucking things were. Capacitors, super something or others, wazoo this.
I mean, you took $400 worth of stuff and you turned it into like a very cool tool. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get the geekery in that. I
And it
mean,
was,
you could probably also pull that together with just like a hot gun, solder
oh
heat
yeah.
gun,
Yeah, yeah. I
um,
think, if you have the
onesie
skills,
twosie.
you
Yeah.
can certainly do this stuff on your own. But it was just like, oh, I thought it would be kind of cool to have that be a little bit of a, was it a forcing function where it's like, yeah, you're gonna build this bridge, spend a little bit more money and add like a rad tool to your tool chest
hmm
or to your
I
workshop. So
mean, I've taken on smaller projects just for the excuse to go buy a big expensive tool. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and that was, I mean, that was super fun to do that whole thing. We did make the mistake on the board. So when we had it all soldered up, there's a battery holder that solders through the board, and so the little points stick down on the bottom. In my workshop, because when I started doing workshop stuff fucking years and years ago, I was focused on opening a welding company. Almost all my tables are metal. And so we put
Oof.
it on there and immediately it unsoldered itself. And I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, I've had a similar experiences. Those lithium battery holders are a little bit terrifying. There was a dev board product that I bought, and it was a 18650 holder,
Mm-hmm.
but the battery holder itself was
Mm-hmm.
completely metal. And so if you know anything about 18650s, you've got your like anode side, and then like I might have this backwards, but like the cathode is the entire casing plus the other side. Uh, so
Huh,
you've got
okay.
these metal things, and as they cut through that plastic, you effectively have just completely shorted your
Yeah.
entire thing. And I was just sitting on my desk, and I think I like poked it, and it just started smoking. And I
Yep.
was like, oh, this is not a good thing to have on my desk. So
No, 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 not
that
consumer
went to
friendly.
yeah, USB operation only after that.
Uh, so, and I think that was their thing is like, hey, everybody says hardware is hard. We found that there was no exception to that for us. Is like, oh, you come up with stuff like this, which is kind of funny for us, but certainly not so funny if you sell it and someone burns their fucking house down or whatever. So you got to be, I don't think we'll be selling that until we either make like some significant change in the design, or
Yeah,
otherwise.
there's a sticker that says "Don't assemble on metal table." But,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Be very careful of this like super dangerous bridge.
yeah,
Do
well,
not cross in
that's
high
cool.
winds.
I mean,
So
you reminded me of one more little fun thing from LoRaWAN Live, which is, I did this presentation there with Rack Wireless, and that was with Jose over there, and
mhm.
so it was really cool to showcase Helium alongside the story of their sticker tracker. Um, and so it's, folks on this call are probably familiar with like the Nano Things
Mhm.
sticker,
Yep.
similar format, right? It's a flexible PCB with all your fun stuff attached to it. Um, but one of the cool things that Rack announced at this event was that they're open sourcing that entire thing.
Oh, cool.
And so you can go download the plans, you can go to JLC PCB, and you can order a fully complete, modified version of one of those things. So,
Oh, very
if
cool.
you want to throw on, some other sensor or,
Oh,
put it in a
interesting.
different format or make it in a fun shape, whatever, that like it's sky's the limit with that stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
super cool.
yeah.
I think this like move towards just like I mean, to me it seems like total virtue signaling, and I'm a part of it. Is like, oh yeah, everything's open source, is actually super good anyway. It's like
Yeah.
like that's the way we figure out some new application is by making it available to as many people as possible.
Yeah. The collaborative spirit in the LoRaWAN space is surprisingly good. It was actually one of the other takeaways that I had from that event is like you go
Oh,
talk to these manufacturers and folks are willing to like, you know, really think about problems and really, find unique solutions or, talk about things that they've experienced, stuff like that. It's just total open book. Love it.
right on. Shit
Yeah.
yeah. Shit yeah. I see you wearing the Gristle King shirt. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yep.
No one's screaming at you from the sidewalks there though, like in was it Austin?
No,
You
no.
got the
Uh-oh. I just got a earthquake alert.
oh well, hopefully it
Yeah.
doesn't quake you out of here.
Earthquake detected.
Oh,
Drop cover, hold on, protect yourself. This could be exciting.
ooh. Well, I hope we don't see you die on live television, but
Yeah.
it'd be pretty amazing if we just see that thing shaking around.
Last time I got one of these things, it was like a half second after the earthquake. So
Huh?
we'll see if this one
What's your dog doing?
sleeping. Yeah, she doesn't even know.
Because they're supposed to know about earthquakes before us. So
Right. Well, yeah, we'll see if she barks in a second.
yeah, we'll see. Let's see. Jim Leacone Solar Hive is the next deep in to launch. I've been seeing a ton of deep ins coming down the pipe, and I think we got a couple of them coming up on deep in state on this thing later this week and next week. So yeah, deep in world is out there. I saw there's a little bit of kerfluffle with XNet and Helium. I'm just like, oh, there's no need for us to shit talk each other. Right? It's like as much as we can, just help other projects survive. And if they're going to die and do a shitty thing, let them die and do a shitty thing on their own. Is my general thing. Let's see. So I saw Helium Foundation launched the membership plans
Yes.
this week.
Yeah, I think we had like a kickoff call. If not, there's going to be a kickoff call coming up. I
Okay,
know Scott was pinging me for some notes. I'm talking with him today.
cool.
Just make sure that we've got everything sort of lined up to tell a really good story there.
Yep. And there's
Um,
a free
yeah.
version. I think the cheapest dollar version is $100 a year, and then the most expensive thing I saw was $20,000 a year.
Mhm.
So it's a pity you didn't launch it 2 years ago because I would have totally thrown down the fucking 20 G's from all the HNT I had. Like, hell yeah, put me in front.
Oh man. Well,
And I would have
yeah,
actually sold some tokens and gotten out of that at a good time. But
yeah.
whatever, it was fun.
I was ready to be like a $1,000 member back in the day.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it would be weird for me to be a member now, being the like one that you'd come and talk to.
yeah.
Um,
Just like
but yeah,
signing your
I think it'll,
membership approval.
yeah, to like book my, maybe that's how I get like free vacations. Just be like Joey's self-consulting
Yeah.
time or something like that. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, kind
but
of cool to see that. I was looking through the various whatever benefits. I think at $7,000 a year, you get an OUI. So I'm really curious to see how the OUI stuff is handled. I mean, certainly that's
yep.
not the actual price of an OUI if you just want the OUI, but kind of cool to see that come down the pipe. Have you guys done anything
Yeah.
with the different like splitting out dev addresses, or is it still on the back
Uh,
end to fix that for now or unknown?
Splitting out dev addresses. Uh,
Right, because
what do
right
you mean
now
by that?
you have to buy what is it blocks? What are they called? Blocks of 8 or something?
Slabs.
Or sorry,
Yeah.
slabs. Thank you. I knew there's some word.
Yep.
Um, dude, I was talking
Uh,
to a guy yesterday who used so much jargon that was crypto jargon. I was just like, and he wasn't doing it on purpose. It was just his world. And Max and I are like, holy fuck, what did that guy just say? So it's good that at least I know what slabs are. Yeah, I think you have to buy 8 slabs with an OUI right now, so it makes it $900, something like that.
yeah. So it's one slab of eight.
Oh, one slab of 8. Thank you.
Yeah. So that won't break up. There's sort of some technical reasons why those come in little blocks of eight.
Okay.
But you know, we've floated this a number of times in the community that pricing is open to governance, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, as it currently stands, the Helium Foundation is a person in the loop for people getting onboarded, and this is just sort of due to technical constraints on the
Hmm.
way that the config service is built. But it is, one of these things that I'm talking with Scott about is like, what is the 2024 roadmap? Um,
Yeah.
so one of those things is just getting that, back the way it was, totally permissionless, decentralized into
Yeah, I
DevRel.
could rent out dev addresses from the GK as escort. I'd have some
Well,
fun marketing that.
I mean, so actually, from your slab, you could sublease one dev address, and then you could set up a route. So, if say like the GK server wanted to go in for $900, and eight people wanted to run their own LNS, and
Hmm.
they just wanted one dev address each, they could
Hmm.
technically do that. You just have to like make it so that each one of those was on its own route, and they'd run their own thing.
Yeah, cool. Shit, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it seems like
but
it's
yeah,
that's
we just don't want fragmentation of the dev address space on the network side because then the next thing that you go build on top of it, like the offsets are weird. It just gets kind of funky.
okay. I
Yeah.
saw too that Helium is running. It looks like a new voting system.
Yeah.
There's a new test vote out there, and it seems like the vote is it's not for chocolate ice cream this time. It's like for your favorite, and clearly chocolate ice cream is the best of all flavors. Uh,
Strong
although if they
disagree.
put in chocolate chip cookie dough, that would have crushed that. But
That's
as
true. I'd go for some chocolate chip cookie dough over just about anything every day.
yeah, yeah, significant oversight on the Helium Foundation's part to not include the finest out there. So it looks like there's a test vote for these things, and you're choosing your favorite IoT device and just seeing what happens. And that's at what's it, modular.heliumvote.com.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah, definitely get in there and pressure test it. I think I noticed like one little bug
Okay.
in setting up new positions, if I remember correctly. I've been meaning to go back and dig into it. But the dev team that put that together, this is like an entirely new voting system outside of Realms because we wanted something that was much more, native and familiar to Helium Vote. Um, yeah, yeah,
You're
get
getting
in
some
there,
feedback.
Sigrita. Yeah, there's so this got built by I think it was Peroni on the Nova Labs team. Put a bunch of work into this, and then our protocol team, Bradley, my man.
Bradley,
That's
fucking
that's
come on, dude.
yeah, vanilla's
Clearly
the only
incorrect.
way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, uh, so yeah, there's a lot of room for cleaning things up
Yep.
and little UI tweaks and just making sure it's as polished and like as good as it can be, sort of trying to reach back to that experience that we had with Helium Book before. Um,
Yep.
so yeah,
Yep. Oh, looks like there's some improvement. Cool.
good. Yeah.
Nice. I see Bobby's in the house. Bobby, I'm expecting you to ask all kinds of crazy questions. That's your role. Let's see. I saw governance office hours. You guys have started that up. I know Max and I are working on some governance stuff as well, so that's cool.
Mhm.
HIP 92 did not pass, and that
Yeah,
was
that
on.
was.
Let me add this in here. There's got to be an easy way
Oh,
for me
this
to do
was
this
the
shit.
rewards. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so, and I think if Max and I were talking about yesterday, his position on it was like, hey, if you go back and like start correcting errors for one thing, you have to do it for every other thing. And so you just got to say like, hey, sometimes there's mistakes, and that's part of being these new networks.
Yeah. I guess I didn't get super involved in this one, but it just felt like blockchains only move forward. Like we used to have times where like, the blockchain would go down on the Helium L1 and it would
Yep.
wake up and then somebody would get like 1,000 HNT
Yeah.
and
So
nobody was
awesome.
writing hips to claw that back, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So good.
so it's, yeah, it's, is what it is.
Yeah. 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 Bobby's asking for an explanation. I mean, I think that's it in very general terms. Is like, hey, there's this pre-mine. There was a mistake made for I think data only hotspots, and the hip was to say like, hey, the mistake should be rectified. But Joey's kind of point, and I think the generally correct thing is like, nope. If you make a mistake and we fuck it up, like we're just gonna roll with it. That's the only fair way to do it. Otherwise, we have votes about every single mistake, and you got a bunch of kind of clogging up of resources, and I don't know, become
Yeah.
super inefficient.
I will say that the hip authors did a really good job of making like a really sort of clear path to making that like a feasible thing. Like those tokens weren't going to come from the you know the mining pool, right? Like
Yeah,
it sort of got set up where the Helium Foundation said, like, wait, we've got IoT, we can make these folks whole. They did a ton of analysis on figuring out which hotspots were involved. Um, I think I probably had hotspots in there if that was a data only thing. I had some data onlys running, um, but yeah, ultimately it's like that is the job of like a hip writer is to like try to paint the best picture. Like I wrote a big hip and it didn't even go to vote like recently, and it's just like the the process of going through all of that teaches so much.
yeah,
So I have tons of respect for the folks that put that together, and I definitely understand the say frustrations when you know you're so behind a concept, but um, Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't go, it doesn't go.
the
I think
community's going to do what the community's going to do.
that's the whole point. I'll tell you this: I don't think there's a better system, but I fucking hate that GitHub pull request, whatever the push. Every time I try and do that, it's just like I fucked the whole thing up again.
I saw one of your things come through. I was
Oh
up
my
there like
god,
just trying to make this thing work.
that was just like
Yeah,
yeah. All my notes are like, hey, this is the seventh time I've tried this.
hit me up next time. I have been just boot camped by every engineer I've ever worked with and making sure that I've got every little GitHub thing under my belt. So
Okay,
uh,
maybe
probably not a bad person to be teaching that stuff, I think.
yeah.
But
Well, I mean,
yeah,
Abai ended up coming in and he's like, hey, what we're gonna do is like delete all the attempts at changing you made, and we'll just put this in fresh. He's like, don't do this way again, but this is how we're gonna do it this time. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. He keeps that stuff nice and
yeah,
clean.
he's sharp. He's sharp. Let's see. Bobby, I'm writing a hip right now to have another land rush for 24 hours. Huh. Why would that be good?
Oh, so this is for, is that the end of the last land rush
Probably, yeah.
for staking?
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I look at that stuff and Bobby, the question I always have is like, okay, why are we like what are the tokens being used for? And if we assume tokens are kind of precious things or useful things, do we want to just throw them out for kind of no great reason? And a lot of times from my perspective, it's like God, um, tokens should be used for like really specific things that are very clearly beneficial to the network, and also assume that a lot of mistakes are going to be made with like what we assign tokens to, with actions we assign tokens to. So
Yeah. And if everything's a land rush, and nothing's a land rush. But
yeah,
oh,
yeah. The goal is to
yeah.
get new people to come to the community to buy and stake HNT. Like, so the question I've got is like, what purpose does staked HNT serve? I don't really see it other than that's like because people say, oh, it's belief in the network. Like, if you believe in the network, you'll be out deploying devices, or using devices. Like that's where the
Couldn't
real
be said.
belief comes. What's
Couldn't have
that?
said it better myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, the state HNT thing is really helpful for vote security. Um, we don't have quite that mechanism on the IoT and mobile side. You know, that the HNT side represents that well. But yeah, if we're trying to push people to stake, I think one of the things we probably need to do is just like publish what the like, you know, uh, yield is for folks doing that staking. I
yeah.
think there's kind of some metrics maybe on Explorer right now, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm looking at the comments. It drives the price up and makes our HNT worth more, but it's like a false value, right? Like
Like,
it's just, and yeah, Joey, can put your earmuffs on. But I just look at that. It's like, what useful thing is staking doing? If it locks things up, there's got to be some reason that locking things up makes the network better, and I don't generally see it. And Ed's point, everyone who staked validators lost their butts. Yeah, I mean, I staked one. I don't know if I'm fuck. I just stopped paying attention to anything to do with token price. And it's like, all right, I'm going to use the network and trust that using it and learning how to use it and contributing is going to be the best way to deliver value to the system, and that's it. So, yeah,
I take my earmuffs off.
yeah,
Earmuffs
yeah.
off.
Your earmuffs can now come off.
Yeah.
The single greatest comment here. There isn't. I don't know what that is in reference to, but I'm glad it's there. I may use this like multiple times. So
I'll put that on a shirt.
yeah, yeah, there isn't. What else is going on? I keep working on the VO2 Max or VO2 Mask. That thing's been super fun. Right now it's just Bluetooth only, but I think I'm gonna do it for as a Helium unit in the long term, which would be cool because then you can take this mask and rather than the current VO2 mask, which is on the market, that's $5,800, is Bluetooth, so you can use that in the gym,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
great for in the gym. But if you're out even on a track, and you're having your athlete run 400s or the worst distance ever 800s, um, super hard to kind of track them in real time. So
Yeah, that would be really cool. And we kind of talked about that like aggregation over LoRaWAN earlier, and if you're just sort of sending every 5 or 10 seconds what those stats are, um, it's cool just to be able to like do all your thing, have the thing on, leave the track, and then get home, sit in your like ice tub or whatever it is people do after scary
After
things
working out
like
hard,
running a
yeah.
track. And then, yeah, you've got all your metrics and you can kind of like reflect and improve.
Figure out what you did. Yeah, I mean, so there's a part of it where I think, okay, you want to be able to see in real time what you're doing, just like if you wear a heart rate monitor in your athlete, you want to see what's going on there so you stay in some certain zone. So probably having like a watch that connects to the mask is a decent idea.
Right.
But I think we're coming into this pretty exciting kind of phase in the general IoT and humanity realm where we start to collect data on groups. And so if you have a group of cyclists or a group of runners or a group of
Mm,
whatever, and we start to see like for if you ever worked in a group of athletes, you know that sometimes people are stronger, sometimes they're weaker. Like you trade places, break and trail, whatever it is. I think it's going to be really cool to see some of the data that comes out of that. Yeah, just like improve our understanding of human performance. So
yeah. Well, and then of course there's like the Strava map equivalent. Like you start putting all of those sorts of metrics on a map and you
yeah,
start to understand, how scary some of those trails are, things like that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I remember meeting when I was running a bunch and on Strava, I'd go back home and see like who was out there at the same time and kind of remember like, oh yeah, that was a dude that was coming up the hill when I was going down the hill. And I'd meet
Mm,
people the next week and be like, hey, we passed each other on Strava last time. I didn't know your name. What's up, Adam, or whatever their name was. Kind of like a
yeah.
funny social network piece to it. But I think the same thing can happen as you add in more data. Is like, oh, damn, your VO2 max is pretty high, or
Right.
whatever it
Super
is that
cool.
athlete nerds say to each other.
Right, right. Yeah.
Let's see. So Wi-Fi talk. I think you have a Helium Wi-Fi. Oh, you got one. Cool. Super cool, dude.
Mm, jelly. I don't even have one.
I don't. Yeah, I don't have one, so I don't have a ton to talk about yet. Maybe I'll see if I can get Max on to talk about it. Although I don't think he has one either. But yeah, maybe we push for that next week as we talk about some of the Wi-Fi stuff. So
I don't know what this helium moving away from CBRS. I heard completely the opposite, so I don't know
yeah,
where that news would come from. But
yeah.
um,
I'm not touching that one.
okay, yeah, yeah,
I'll
they,
wait
they
for
both
official word on
serve
it.
very important purposes in terms of creating coverage. Like you're
Right.
not going to cover city blocks with a Wi-Fi antenna.
I mean, I think the cool thing is just the whole exploration of these pieces and how deep in general and helium specifically has really opened the door to a lot of people to understand a little bit more about their that kind of technology world around them, and made it so that all of these other projects can come in and do similar things.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just I don't know. It certainly opened up my world. Like I didn't understand any of this shit before. Now I feel like okay, I've got like one layer deeper understanding of some of this stuff. So
Yeah, I talk to a lot of folks who are like, how do I crowdsource a community deployment of sensors. And so and then it's really cool to go and point to like WeatherXM and some of these projects where it's like, you build a valuable experience, you like create incentive mechanisms, like there's all sorts of like these different angles that you can take to sort of help people along that path. Um, but there's a lot of value in big sets of distributed data like that, or
yeah,
you know what I mean, distributed sensors, lots of
yeah,
data.
yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
the Weather XM team is super cool. I was talking to those guys recently, and one of the things they're doing, I think, is awesome. Is those guys are saying they said this to me. They're like, hey, um, radar doesn't exist. Like the kind of weather predicting radar that we have in the states doesn't exist in huge parts of the world. Which I
hmm,
didn't. I mean, it didn't even think about. So in a lot of parts of the world, you can't say like, hey, we're gonna have rain in 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 2 hours. Like it's just there's not enough sensors on the ground. They don't
wow.
have the radar stations there. And so if
Yeah.
you deploy these nets of weather sensors that are all, $400 for a helium sensor plus whatever the gateway is that you need there, all of a sudden you give people who didn't have access to weather data access to weather data. And so that opens up a bunch of new decisions that they can make about how they're going to plant, how they're going to do whatever it is they're going to do. So,
Wow. I never thought about that. I wonder what the hardware entry point looks like for a radar. Obviously you're not going to do like the full on like 50-foot dome on top of your house, but um,
I think, I
you
mean,
might, but like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it seemed like a really cool thing as once they told me about the radar thing, and I was like, oh well, how do we figure out how to build that into WeatherXM? So maybe it's like a village or a town says like, oh, we'll do a radar for mega tokens, and that's just like a totally out of left field idea. Like they have not made any comment on that, so don't go pushing them on it.
Sure, yeah. Well, like one of the things that was wild to me when I was doing my like university like engineering classes,
Hmm.
we would try and do these like analytics on radar data.
Hmm.
And you go and look at the raw data, and there's massive shadows from mountains, things like that. And the sort of status quo of like the NOAA and other sort of meteorologists, they just take it like it's like, oh yeah, we'll just interpolate, the gaps in between there. And so they'd have to do all of this additional work to clean that data up.
Yeah,
And it just, to me, always felt like it would, why don't you just put another one on the opposing mountain and now you've completely cleaned up that entire shadow that you just, and we're talking like 100 miles like of big gaps of data, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and yeah, if you can fill that in the same way we have that overlapping coverage for helium, like overlapping coverage for radar data like that, it would give a much cleaner picture and a much cleaner data set for these folks to work with. And we've just been dealing with it for the last like 30 years, whatever these stations have been stood up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm psyched on WeatherXM. I've been talking to their team a bunch lately. Let's see. So, Bobby, you're not happy with them. I don't know why. I think they are doing something pretty different than a lot of these other projects where they're not racing to throw out like a shitty model. And I get that. Like, and I think I got to be careful about how I say that because they're not racing to throw out like an unfinished model. What they want is to come out with a model that works and is good enough to build on for the foreseeable future. And I think that's an excellent way to go. That there are other ways to do it where you can say like, hey, we'll just like the way Helium has said, Frank has said, he's like, yeah, we're gonna keep the plane flying. You guys put the fire out. Like that's one way to do it, and that's obviously worked. It built the largest LoRaWAN network in under 50 months. Like that's a way that works. But there's also, and everyone on the call kind of gets this, there's also significant downsides to that. And so I think WeatherXM is just on the opposite side of saying, hey, before we take off, we're going to make sure the plane's not on fire, and then we're going to take off. And that means that it's going to take a longer time before they get off the ground, in the plane analogy. So just different ways of doing things.
Is this kind of the idea that like the folks that are setting these things up now are the folks that are going to be there sort of regardless of token models? Like it's like they're there because they're getting valuable insights. They, you know, believe in this idea of distributed data collection.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, as I talk to these different projects, I mean, I look at this stuff on the token side, and I was talking with my wife with Lee about this morning. I don't see that there's any project ever that will have a really strong token price incentive to keep the thing deployed over the long term. Right? Like that's not the way the markets work. Is that there's always going to be like this crazy spike, and then it'll pretty quickly come out to like a low equilibrium that is probably pretty close to where we are with helium right now, where it's like, yep, it's worth it to leave it online. If it goes down inside my house, I'll fix it. If it's out in the mountains and I'm not using that data like I'm not going to fix it. And I think that's what we can expect for all of these projects. Is I'm not a part of Helium Foundation in any official sense. It's like, all right, if that thing makes $5 a month, $10 a month, cool, I'll leave it up. Like that's enough to make it kind of make sense. If it's making a penny a month, maybe I don't care when it goes down. If it's making $20,000 a month, I mean, you fucking saw what I did. I was out running around mountains and putting these things up. So, but the $20,000 a month thing like never lasts, and there should be no expectation that it ever will last. So I think this
Right.
idea of like we're going to build a project on it being like a consistent, hugely contributing side hustle is a pretty dangerous way to build a project because it doesn't seem to me to fundamentally be able to work in the long term, at least in the U.S. with the cost of
I mean,
living.
I I think one of the things too for like all of these projects, like we can look to networks that build this sort of distributed infrastructure without reward mechanisms, and they do grow, right? TTN is a chief example there, and people find a lot of utility in that. They find a lot of value in that. But I think that the sort of defining factor is that you could stand one of those gateways up and you, you know, I think that the Helium community has the strong belief that like if somebody's going to be transferring a ton of data through this thing, that I should be compensated, accordingly for it.
Yep.
Um, and you can pull all of these models sort of back to that like base level. And I think you have to, always fall back on what is that utility layer. Um, so whether it's WeatherXM or any of these other ones, there's always going to be that sort of incentive spike in the initial side of things, but it always has to fall back on the utility.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that 100%. And I think these points from Ed and Chad are correct. This, token prices, everything. Like I think it's certainly everything at the start, but it can't be relied on as like the long term everything. It's got to be as Joey said, you got to have something useful coming out, and that's what kind of underpins that value. So I think with Helium, the super exciting thing is like, all right, no one's ever had a global LoRaWAN before. What do we do with it, right? And
Yeah.
clearly, like just tracking is not, to me, it's not enough to make it super persuasive yet.
Well, and I think the other part of this too is it's not just going to be the foundation's job to make that work. Like
Yep.
I've talked with some teams where I was like, wow, I think actually you could get really good value from WeatherXM data. And conversely, I've had, you know, people that I've talked to at events or like community members go out and talk to universities, go talk to companies, and they say like, "Hey, I think I have this really cool opportunity for you to leverage Helium." And then they come talk to me, and it's like, "Oh my God, you've got like an amazing idea. Let's totally get these things out there."
Yep.
Um, so it's kind of everyone's responsibility to push that stuff forward, um, and it kind of goes back to that like, you know, if you believe in this thing, you're out there putting hotspots up. If you believe in this thing, you're also out there, exploring solutions, like trying to build these things up. And that goes for literally any one of these like, yeah, infrastructure networks.
Yeah. 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 And I think like this thing is I kind of wrestle with this because Max is on the opposite side of me. Is it like we think people are sticking with Helium open for a bull market, another all time high. Max is very definitely like, hey, if you deploy these things, like no one serious is going to deploy these things for no reward, right? Like that's not going to drive the growth of a network. But I think as Siegfried says, and I think this is pretty close to right. And I think Max would agree with this. Is like you have these huge valuation, or not valuations. You have this like huge value extraction as you build the network, especially if you're in the first cohort to come on. We just published that thing on Golden Hawks that showed like, all right, here's where people earn the most on Helium, and it was way before the network really got built out. And so it's like, of course, these incentives drive deployments, but you have to think what's going to drive long term usage of the network. And I think it may shift from people looking for tons of passive income early to places in rural areas where it's like, oh, to them having weather information is more valuable than having tokens.
Mhm.
And I think that's where it starts to get super interesting. Is like, okay, well, maybe it's not the enormous amount of dollars a month that some miner earns. It's actually the data that thing produces, and the tokens are just like, oh, that's cool. Like we'll use that as a little bit extra, or it'll drive an incentive to deploy a station in a certain area. So
Yeah. I mean, another way to phrase this, if everyone that owned a Helium hotspot, actually, yeah, sure, let's go with that. If everyone that owned a Helium hotspot would manage to convince one person to go deploy a sensor that updated with some sort of relative frequency, say every like 5 minutes,
mm-hmm.
um, they would immediately meet their base level, like, do I keep this thing online all year long,
mm,
for data transfer? Um, that offsets your power costs,
right,
offsets,
right,
whatever, that sort of thing. Because that's a dollar a year. That's one device. Um, and so that, like, if you push that community a little bit more to say like, if you want to make this thing successful, you got to like sort of push on it a little bit. Most people want the thing for free. They don't want to do the work.
yeah.
Um, but
I don't like the
I think that's sort of like how low that bar is maybe the case that I'm trying to make, right? Like
yeah.
it doesn't take a whole lot to get things to that sort of next level. And then on the foundation side, like I talk to these folks, I'm trying to get people to deploy, 900, 10,000 sensors or whatever, stuff like that. But um, when you when you create that coverage, that opportunity to deploy those sensors gets even stronger, right? And so
Yeah.
looking a little bit past, today, looking a little bit past this week and saying like, I'm going to keep these things online. I'm going to keep deploying these gateways makes for that stronger long-term opportunity. But they're, in the space that we're in, there's a lot of folks who are going to dip in and dip out.
Yeah.
And that's totally expected. But it's about maintaining some of that base layer, in my opinion,
Yeah.
where you know having 100% coverage in every major metropolitan city is like a really important piece, and it's really attractive to network operators for roaming and things like that.
Yeah. 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 I don't know, the whole usage thing is just super fun. I think about like the Weather XM station I've just been using. That's a Helium station. I put
Hmm.
that out to this spot where that landowner doesn't stop us from paragliding there, but it's also private land, so you can't put a permanent weather station on there. But I can put up a temporary weather station, and having access to that data, we haven't had a weather station on that land ever before. And so all of a
Hmm.
sudden, the local community is like, oh, now we can see the temperature down in the valley and the temperature up on the mountain, which is important to us because as temperature drops as it goes up, it gives you a prediction about how like what the conditions are going to be. That's way more valuable than any reasonable amount of tokens. It's not way more valuable than 18 grand a month, but like any reasonable deployment, Bobby, I think you said it makes $1 a day, and I think the paragliding club might pay more than $1 a day for this stuff, or maybe paragliding club and some other club together might pay more than $1 a day for the access to this kind of information. So I think the utility of the information is pretty important. So we're fucking at 10:01.
Yep, we blew way past, got all excited.
A whole minute passed. All right. Let's see. IoT working group, IoT mapping UI. Nope. I don't know about any news about that, but we can talk about it next week. So, all
Yeah,
right, buddy.
yep, we'll have updates there. It'll be good.
Okay. Look at these guys coming in at the last fucking minute with 300 questions. Where were you
I
20
know.
minutes ago? This thing fucking
We
starts
just
at
need
9
like a whole
o'clock.
other hour for this. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. We'll catch up either on Discord or next week. Good to see you, buddy.
All right. Take it
See
easy.
you guys later. Bye.